All right, welcome. Today's explainer is, honestly, it's a really exciting pivot for us. Up to this point in our soul canvas journey, we've been deep in the trenches of songwriting, right? Finding that core message, crafting the perfect hook, and pouring our hearts into the lyrics. But today we're shifting gears. We're stepping into the shoes of the producer. We're going to dive into the incredibly rewarding process of taking a pretty good AI-generated track in Suno and turning it into something truly great. It's not about just sitting back and letting the software do all the heavy lifting. No, it's about you leading the technology to actually serve your story.
So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll talk about adopting the producer mindset. Then, we'll look at renovating with remix, painting with prompts, mastering the weirdness setting, and finally, answering the age-old question, remix or start fresh. Let's jump right in.
Okay, let's dive into this first one. Section 1. The producer mindset from good to great. Because making that shift from songwriter to producer, it really requires looking through a completely different lens.
You know that feeling when you generate a brand new song in an AI tool like Suno? It is so tempting to just hit play and instantly ask yourself, is this good? But, as our source material points out, that is actually a trap. It's a really common mistake. Why? Because it's a limiting question. It forces this black and white yes or no judgment on a piece of art that is honestly still breathing and evolving. It basically stops your whole creative process dead in its tracks.
So we need a massive mindset shift here. The amateur asks, is this good? But the producer asks, what is this song trying to become? As a producer, you're the one leading the technology. You're not just passively consuming whatever it spits out. Maybe that newly generated track isn't 100% there yet, but what does it need? Does it just need a slightly softer piano in the intro? Maybe a more mature, raspy vocal? Or does that chorus just need a little more emotional energy to really pop? By asking what the song is trying to become, you literally open the door to refinement. You realize that the best songs aren't usually born perfect on the very first try. They get to that final amazing form through really careful editing.
All right, moving on to Section 2, Renovating with Remix, the art of refinement. Because once you actually know what your song is trying to become, well, you need the right tool to help get it there.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we mean. Think of the remix feature like renovating a house, rather than just bulldozing it and building a completely new one from scratch. When you use the advanced remix tool, the core foundation of your song stays intact. You are simply preserving the stuff that already works while making super thoughtful, intentional improvements to the areas that just need a little love.
So what kind of renovations are we actually talking about? Well, you can use Remix to make incredibly specific, tiny improvements. Let's say you have just one awkward lyric where the AI completely mispronounced a super basic word. Seriously, it happens all the time. You do not have to start over. You just update that specific line and generate a remix. Suno will usually preserve the original musical character while fixing the vocal performance right around that one revised lyric. It's kind of like magic. You can also use it to, say, adjust the vocal maturity, maybe making the singer sound a bit older, maybe more intimate. You can soften up the piano, or just give that chorus a massive boost of emotional energy. These tiny, small improvements, they often create surprisingly huge results.
Which brings us to Section 3, Painting with Prompts, Dialing in the Emotion. Because right alongside the remix tool, you've got another powerhouse instrument in your producer toolkit, the style prompt. But listen, we really have to unlearn how we typically use these prompts.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast in the approach here. A weak prompt just picks a genre, create a pop song. Honestly, that is a massive missed opportunity. A true producer prompt paints a vivid picture of an actual emotional experience. Think about the difference here. Intimate acoustic ballad, mature male baritone, warm strings, gentle piano. See what happened? You aren't just rattling off a genre, you are literally describing exactly how you want your listeners to feel.
So, when you're refining a track, tweaking that style prompt is really a step-by-step process of dialing in that emotion. First up, identify the vocal maturity and delivery. Does your message need a really warm, experienced voice to communicate comfort, or maybe a softer, breathier voice to show vulnerability? Second, define your specific instrumentation. And remember, instruments aren't just sounds, they carry emotion. A solo piano feels deeply personal, right? While sweeping strings add this sense of emotional movement and scale. And finally, set your tempo and atmosphere. A slower tempo gives a listener room to really absorb the lyrics, while a moderate tempo feels way more conversational. Literally every single word in your prompt should serve the ultimate emotional destination of the song.
Okay, Section 4, Mastering the Weirdness Setting, Finding the Sweet Spot. We have to talk about a setting that honestly confuses a ton of new users. but it is absolutely critical when you're wearing that producer hat and refining a track. It's called the weirdness setting. Now think of weirdness like a dial that controls exactly how much creative freedom you are handing over to the AI. If you set it super low, the results are going to be very, very predictable. It stays really close to familiar melodies and structures. And that's great if you literally just want minor improvements to a track you already love. But if you crank that dial all the way up to high weirdness, the AI kind of goes rogue. It gets highly experimental. You might get some wonderfully unexpected ideas, sure, or it might turn your sweet acoustic ballad into weird alien techno. It will absolutely wander very, very far from your original vision.
So, where should a producer live on this dial? Well, our source material points squarely to the middle range, specifically right between 40 and 60% as the absolute sweet spot. Hanging out in this medium range is ideal because it introduces fresh ideas, subtle melodic changes, maybe some new instrumental textures, but it keeps the song totally recognizable and musically coherent. It perfectly preserves the integrity of your original composition while still handing you a little bit of that spontaneous creative magic.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 5, Remix or Start Fresh, the golden rule. Because guys, this is easily the most frequently asked question in this entire process. You know exactly what your track needs, but do you hit remix or do you just completely start over?
Well, here is a rock-solid framework you can use every single time. If you generally like the vibe of the song, but you just want to make small improvements, like adjusting a few lyrics, changing the vocal maturity, tweaking the instruments a bit, you use the remix strategy. But there are definitely times when remixing just isn't going to cut it. If you realize the song is in completely the wrong genre, or the melody is just totally fighting your lyrics, or the whole arrangement feels completely off, do not keep forcing it. You start fresh. You take your lyrics, you drop them into a brand new project with a totally updated prompt, and you give the AI completely fresh creative freedom. The golden rule is super simple. Small tweaks equal remix. Total reinvention equals start fresh. Keeping this one guideline in mind will literally save you hours of frustration.
As your confidence grows with these tools, you're going to realize something really cool. You're no longer just sitting there asking, hey, what can this software create for me? Instead, you're asking, how can I help this software better understand my vision? And that right there is the ultimate mark of a producer. You are the one in charge. The producer leads and the technology follows. You are using AI not to replace your own human creativity, but to totally amplify it.
And that brings us to our final and honestly most important test. When you've done the remixes, when you've obsessed over tweaking your prompts, and when you're sitting there comparing 5 different versions of a track, don't ask which one sounds newer or which one is more technically impressive. Ask yourself this: does this song honestly represent my heart? Because at the end of the day, truly great songs aren't created by people just chasing the newest flashy software features. They are created by thoughtful people refining authentic, deeply meaningful stories. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now go out there and refine your masterpiece. But it does kind of beg the question, right? Once you've actually polished that song to absolute perfection, how in the world do you get anyone to actually listen to it? Well, we will save that puzzle for next time.